Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to episode 9 of Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius. That is me, your fucking happy-go-lucky host. I don't know. Trying to figure out who I am. This morning I wrote a kind of long post on about my yoga session, how I've been struggling to go from an angry, aggressive, pissed off, tough guy to being a little bit more peaceful. And it's definitely been working. But it's always been a struggle, and I always still kind of, it's hard to let that go. That's probably what all that profanity is. You want to be a tough guy. But anyhow, hopefully you guys listened last week. Last week we did chapter 1 of Brightside, my first novel. And today we will be doing chapter 2. Big surprise there, right? But hopefully you guys are enjoying the story. Definitely a lot of fun for me. Hearing it again after so long. And it's definitely helping me because right now I'm in the process of writing Try Not to Die in Brightside. And I've done a lot this week. Super happy with a lot of death scenes. I'll talk about a couple of those today. And also with Beyond Brightside, which I'm in the process of. This whole month I am taking off just to focus on Try Not to Die in Brightside. Finish that up. And then I'm going to go back into Beyond Brightside. And that's going to help so much because I'll be so much more in a certain character's head. I won't say who. I don't want to give away any spoilers. All right, so let's get into it. Let's see. Well, what else happened this week? It's been a good week. Went to therapy again. I do that every other week. It's always helpful. I really didn't want to do it. It was amazing how hard it was to start. But since I've been going, it's been super helpful. Not only understanding myself, but my relationships, and then it's helped me with my friends that also have their own struggles or whatever. So it's been a good thing. I definitely recommend anyone that's dealing with stuff, which we fucking all are. Let's be honest. No one's got their shit together, or very few people do. I think it's super helpful to talk to someone who's unbiased and might actually have some good advice for you. But what the fuck do I know? Besides that, also went to another yoga class. I've been starting to go to Downey Yoga. It's awesome. Love the facility. This time there was another guy in the class, so I didn't feel as awkward. That's cool. My shoulder, I haven't been able to do much jiu-jitsu at all. Really bad right shoulder. It even limits me a little bit with the yoga, but not too bad. Moderate arthritis. I had a cortisone shot for it maybe, I don't know, it was probably about 6 or 8 months ago or 10 months ago. I'm terrible at telling time, and I don't bother to ever look. But it seems to have worn off because now it's just grinding, and even when I'm giving like my daughter a hug, she's like, ew, that's gross. You can just hear it crunching. So that's kind of kept me out of jits, and then also my low back problems, degenerated disc. But the yoga is super helpful for it. Also been doing more exercising in the pool, also helpful. So staying active, that's what, I also went to my first physical therapy appointment, and that was also helpful. Learning some new things and just how to, really so much my problem is posture and then just my core. So if I get those two things in check, then maybe I should be able to, if I get those in check, I should be able to return to jiu-jitsu. But then it's a question of whether or not I want to risk it. Because really it's a lot of abuse. Best case scenario, I don't get hurt and I have a good workout, but more likely I get beat up and I set myself back a bit. So with yoga and trying to heal my body, and with the pool stuff and everything else, trying to get stronger, it's a little bit hard to think about going backwards. But it is fun to compete, so we shall see what happens with that. What else did I do this week? I've been doing intermittent fasting and super happy with it. I am the lightest I have been since 16, so in 30 years. My senior year in high school. I was a pretty small dude all through up until my junior year in high school, senior year in high school, and during that time from freshman year on, because I was riding the bench and wanting to be big and strong, I was busting my ass. I got to be one of the stronger guys on the team, and one of the bigger guys, but it was because I was just pounding so much protein, working out so hard. Like, it was just, that was my focus. And I finally got to the point where I weighed 215. And I was super happy with that. Well, actually, I wasn't, because then from there, I just kept going. I got to 245. And when I was playing football at Brown, I got, I think, all the way up to like 275, which was way too heavy. And then when I was trying to fight, I was usually around anywhere from 225, 245. Then I became a stay-at-home dad, out of shape, wasn't working out, 255. And so then, but who gives a fuck? But anyways, so most of my life I've been heavier. And I've always, my wife says I don't need to lose weight. Other people tell me I don't need to lose weight. I think I've always had it in my head that, I like being a bigger guy. But honestly, I have a pretty, not a fucking super high body fat percentage, but it's up there. And I was like, well, why not? If I'm worried about my health and longevity and everything else, why not get to where I should be? It's not all about being vain, but it is about being smarter. So I've been doing the intermittent fasting. Usually do like 16 to 18 hour fast. Those are usually cool. I cut out after my last meal, I stop eating. So like maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, and then I'll eat again like noon or a little bit later. But one of the days this week, I tried doing full 24 hours, and the last 4 hours kind of sucked. I ended up being 22 and a half hours that day, mainly because I had to fix dinner for my son. And I said, screw it. But that day I also went to Costco during the fast, and that was not a good idea with all the samples there. And usually I don't have them anyhow. Samples at Costco usually just piss me off because everyone's getting in the way and trying to get free shit. And if that's what you do, I have lots of friends that do that. Cool. It's just not my thing. When I'm in Costco, I want to get the fuck out of there. Pretty much whenever I'm anywhere. But maybe that's me needing to chill a little bit. But yeah, so I've been feeling good. Officially 208. So if I do go back into jiu-jitsu, it'll be nice to know I can easily compete at 205. That was my goal for the Gracie Nationals that I wanted to do this couple months ago and had to back out of because of my back. But yeah, so if I do get back into it, it'll be nice and easy to get to 205, no problem. Don't know where I'll end up with my weight, but right now I'm feeling good, and I figure the more weight I lose, the better it'll be on my knees, my back, and all that stuff. One thing that probably has made, it's probably made the fasting a little bit more difficult in a way, is that I've also been not using cannabis for this entire month. And I'm, 14 days in? Damn, it's only been 14 days. Feels much longer. But I am pretty happy with it. A lot of friends were asking me why I would do it. I've always been so pro-cannabis. Am I just being trendy because it's, a lot of people are doing it this month. Do I just want attention on social media? So yeah, it's probably a little bit of that. But one of my good friends, Anthony, he was doing it as well. I was like, if he could do it, I can do it. And I just wanted to do it. A lot of things I do are just for willpower, just to prove to myself, okay, I can do this. I don't need this. I don't have to have this. And that takes me to, every week I try to answer a question. Before on Goodreads, I answered what was my process for writing. And it's pretty much, if I had my ideal, since I've been writing, it would be pretty much locking myself into a room, no disturbances, my music, lots of caffeine, and lots of cannabis. And then I can just create. I can just focus in, zoom in, open my mind. That's been my process. And so with this, now that I am not using cannabis, right now, taking a break, that's been the reason, one of the reasons I use when I try to rationalize myself into going back to using. I was like, well, fuck, I don't want to not be able to write. I don't want writer's block. I don't want to just waste an entire month of not moving forward on trying not to die. But what's really cool is I'm realizing that's not the case. It probably does enhance in a way, but right now I'm flying on these death scenes. There are 32 death scenes. There were 33, but one wasn't working. So I was like, instead of trying to come up with something new, I was like, fucking cut it. This book is already much longer than the original Try Not to Die at Grandma's House. And it has way more, it also has more death scenes. So like one less is not an issue. But those death scenes are coming along. And so, yeah, so now, and I'm also cutting down on caffeine too. I realized I was definitely having too much. I think it was one day this week, I had trouble sleeping, and I think I was up until about 12:30. And I realized it was because of the caffeine. So I went to the fridge and I dumped the 2 energy drinks that were in there, which is not something I ever do. But again, I was dependent on them. I wanted them. I would stop for a couple days, and then I would go to the store, even though I told myself not to get them, and then I would have them. But no, since I did that, I was like, I just put in my head, and I did this once before with like Monsters or rock stars or something. I was like, these things are probably gonna fucking kill me. I don't need them. They're interfering with my sleep. I realize how important my sleep is, so I still will have caffeine, but then I just started getting it from like yerba mate and green tea and a couple other things that don't have all these chemicals and whatever else. And who knows, like maybe drinking those things are fine, but if I don't need it, then why do it? So yeah, so that was kind of a big week. Got over a couple things, and I'm super pumped that these death scenes are coming out pretty quickly. I didn't know how quickly I would get through them, but I believe out of the 32, I only have 5 more that need. I still have to input all my edits on. Let's see, I think I have about 24 of them left. All these red things, yeah, but that's easy work. Some of them are longer, some of them need a lot more work. So that'll take me like a day, maybe a day or two, depending on what the school schedule's like and if I'm with the kids or have someone to help out. And then after that, I have only have 5 scenes left that need a little bit of reworking. I need to look up some like details. There's one where the main character gets tasered, but she's also covered in water and standing in water. So I need to look up that and whether or not that would kill her and how she would react. That's one thing that kind of sucks about writing traumatic scenes is if you want to make them realistic, you kind of have to know what happens. So I'm looking up a lot of my Google search is fucking pretty nasty. It's like, okay, what household objects do people get impaled with? And then looking at images of all the shit that people have been impaled with at home. And fun stuff like that. It's like, okay, what happens when you're suffocating? And there's one scene that I like a lot where the main character is suffocating because this big, heavy, obese person fell on them. And I was trying to, instead of like looking up that one, I was like, okay, I often play with my breath. And I go to the point where I feel like, I just can't hold it anymore. I think, I forget what my record is, but I've broken 2 minutes. That's out of the water. And underwater before I did a lot more, but that was with hyperventilating and stuff. But but that's what I did. I would put myself in that position. I got completely out of breath, and I'm really thinking about, okay, how does this feel? How would it feel if, I got something covering my face too? And just how much, what's that panic feel like? Yeah, so that's, in order to get these death scenes, I kind of got to go dark and allow myself to kind of experience these things. And it helps me deal with a lot of my fears. And speaking of fears, those have been bad this week because of no cannabis equals really, really, really bad dreams, which can interfere with my sleep. What used to, like the previous week, it was really bad, the first week. This week I've gotten a lot better because I've been messing around with some lucid dreaming type stuff and having a little bit more control. In therapy, I was even talking about them and trying to look at, okay, what do these dreams mean? What are, why am I having the same kind of theme? Why are they so violent? Am I being a protector? What am I trying to do? What am I afraid of? And looking at that stuff seems to help. And so now I'm enjoying it a little bit more and just using it for fuel for the writing. So that's kind of where that all is. I haven't done the final count on the death scenes, and I still have too many shootings, but I have a really nice mauling by a dog. Got a good couple good suffocations, stabbings, getting drugged, choking, poison, all kinds of fun stuff. And then meanwhile, I'm also kind of developing the Try Not to Die in Iraq. Super pumped about that one with Anthony. I like where that's going, completely plotted out. And yeah, just chugging along. But what else is there? There was something else. Oh, the other cool thing that happened this week was my 5-year-old son did his first musical. He performed in Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And my wife did it with him, and as well as my niece, Bailey. I think she's 13. My daughter decided not to. She's been busy with jiu-jitsu and hip-hop and a couple other things. But it was super cool to see my son do it. And I told him, just so proud of him. It's something that I still couldn't do it right now. Well, maybe I could, but I don't know. Maybe if I sat there or acted. But this is a full-on musical where they have to sing and dance and all that stuff. And not my cup of tea. But he did it. He did awesome. First night, he didn't really smile. But he did all the movements. And then the second night, he was able to see a couple people in the audience. And he wasn't as nervous. And so he had a great show. So that was really cool to see. But now, enough of this talk about me and my family. Let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to Brightside. Let's listen to chapter 2. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully you enjoyed the first chapter. This chapter is a couple minutes shorter, not that much shorter. This is narrated by T. Quillen. It's available on Audible, iTunes, on my website for much cheaper. Or you can just listen to the first episodes of Unlocking, or stick around and listen to all these. All right, here it is, chapter 2 of Brightside.
Chapter 2. It was day 39 and I was alone in my office, just Rachel's desk to keep me company. I needed to look busy and pretend to type, my fingers tapping out nonsensical strings. I drank cup after cup of water so I could focus on my throbbing bladder, focus on anything but Rachel. The boots dragging her from my room. My computer dinged. A polite email reminding me of my quota. Brightside required us to work. It wasn't for the money. The government funded most everything. But Brightside needed us to keep busy, to feel productive. They started the jobs program after the first month. Too many Brightsiders had jumped off the mountain, took the easy way out. Quotas kept us from living in our heads. Busy people don't kill themselves. That was the idea, at least. I started dialing. Got 24 hang-ups. 5 don't ever call me agains, and 1 old woman who spent 3 minutes asking about the weather in Greece before she realized that I wasn't her son. I was one of the few Brightsiders allowed to make calls to the outside world. I'd been deemed a low risk, but everything was monitored. If I said one thing, like begged for help, or told anything about the truth of this place, I'd be sitting in the cabin dripping drool by night. Finally, a guy actually sounded interested. I asked him if there was anywhere he dreamed of going. The guy said, "Costa Rica. I've heard good things about that place." In 3 quick clicks, I was on their homepage. Oh, definitely. Costa Rica's great. Do you know the average temperature is 72 degrees? I didn't know that. Yeah, and they've got active volcanoes. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, Costa Rica is definitely the place to go, I said. And we've got some incredible getaways available at great prices. Brightside had given me a sales script, which was shit, but deviation was against the rules. I don't know, the guy said. How much would it run me? Well, I'm sure you'd qualify for our no down payment plan, and our smaller suites are under $200 a month. Well, that's nothing. Exactly. Less than you'd probably spend on gas. I checked the screen. Are you still in management, Mr. Crawford? Yeah, at home enjoying a sick day. Lucky man. How are your benefits over there? Do you have much vacation time built up? Tons. So what do you think? Do you like to own your very own Costa Rican condo? Doesn't that sound like fun? They told us to emphasize the word fun as much as possible. It does, but tell me this, is prostitution really legal over there? The screen said Mr. Crawford had a wife and son, but that was none of my business. For all I knew, he'd gotten a divorce. Computers were never accurate. I told him prostitution was legal, and his laugh made me sick. Would you be looking for a 1-bedroom or 2? I asked. Just 1. Tell me more about this. Are there brothels? I believe so. Now, I've got some nice villas on the Pacific Ocean, and I heard there's no age limit. That's something you'll have to check. Now, this place is right on the water. Why don't we get the process started? If I can get your credit card number and verify a couple of details, we'll be done before you know it. How do I know this isn't some kind of a scam? Good question. Goes to show what a smart man you are. Why don't I just email over a contract? Just click on the link and it'll take you right to our site. Brightside Travel is a very reputable company. Holy shit. You're one of those guys? Tell me what I'm thinking. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. If you'll give me your email address, I'll send you the contract. A door opened and closed on Mr. Crawford's end. A woman's grating voice said, Paul, what are you doing on the phone? You're supposed to be sick. Sounding nothing like the man he'd been when she wasn't around, Mr. Crawford said, I'll be off in a minute. I didn't know if he was still listening to me, but I kept trying. Tell her it's a surprise. Tell her you're doing something special for her, but don't tell her what. As quick as I could, I said, You make this decision and she'll thank you. But he'd already hung up. I had told Carlos, my boss, the website's name was starting to hurt our ability to sell. Carlos said it reminded people Brightside allowed us to live productive lives. Again, I told him, it was hurting sales. Carlos said the PR was worth it. Brightside wasn't very profitable, but we only needed to make enough to cover what the government wouldn't fund, like the ice cream parlor, movie theater, and electronics store. If this had been BMW, I would have had papers everywhere, stacks of sales contracts, important phone calls to return. My Brightside desk had one piece of paper, a blue Post-it note Carlos had stuck on my phone, a completely unnecessary reminder of our 3:00 meeting. I'd never worried about a review before Brightside. Got Salesman of the Month 5 times in a row. Worst thing my ex-boss Saul ever said to me was, slow down a little. Leave something for the other guys. Some of them have families. Here, I shared an office because I sucked so hard. I made another call, but it kept ringing. I stared at the door, waiting for it to open, to see Rachel in that red skirt, her legs glistening with the pina colada lotion. The only thing that entered the office all morning was a note card slipped under the door. It told me I had an appointment with Sharon, Brightside's resident shrink. Sharon liked to say there was beauty in everything. Look at it all. Breathe it in. But she could keep her fucking Kool-Aid. Self-help wasn't going to save me. It was too late for that. Might have worked when I was a kid, when everything started. It was winter, and I was in kindergarten my very first day. The bell rang and class began. Miss Parker assigned us seats. Corey thought I smelled like a girl. Tamika asked to be moved because her dad told her never to trust a honky. Jenny thought I looked weird and stupid. I knew all this before nap time, and it only got worse. I'd been hearing other people's thoughts for a few months, but never this many at one time. Miss Parker told us to be quiet, to try and fall asleep. The ones who couldn't would just lie there and think. A million voices blasting straight into my head. It was like standing behind a jet engine. I covered my ears, mashing my palms until I thought I'd crack my skull. But that's not how thoughts entered me. They just shot in, and I screamed. Miss Parker ran over, thinking I was having a nightmare. She saw my pants covered in piss. Some kids laughed. They all thought I was a baby. I kept my hands over my crotch. Miss Parker told everyone to be quiet. She took my hand. Her skin was dry and scaly, covered in chalk. She took me to the bathroom to get cleaned up. She said there was a change of pants in the teacher's lounge. This sort of thing happened a lot. I remember my little pecker rubbing against the corduroy because the school didn't carry underwear. Miss Parker had to cut the legs off because they were too long. I wondered how many other little peckers had touched this zipper. Miss Parker held my hand again, her skin cutting into mine, and we went back to class. The kids were quietly thinking I was a retard, except for Stephen, probably the only Chinese kid in Columbus. He thought the other kids were jerks, but he just sat there and said nothing. I would have done the same. When the day finally ended, I waited for everyone to leave the room, and then slipped my red rain boots on, because Mom said comfy winter ones were a waste of money. I put on my puffy blue jacket that was my Hulk jacket when I wore Dad's green sweatshirt over it and growled at the mirror. I left my gloves in my pocket and headed to the door. I hoped it wasn't too cold out. I hoped I wouldn't have to wait long. Mom had promised she wouldn't forget, but she said not to worry enough times for me to know better. The snow was coming down hard. The sky was a dark cloud. I put on my gloves that were only just mittens, the kind without fingers because they were cheaper. Over half the class had already been picked up, their parents waiting out front. The rest of the kids were lined up along the fence, with Miss Parker folding her arms and hopping up and down, looking like a skinny big bird. She had the same puffy yellow hair, too, but hid most of it under her brown hat with the giant ear flaps. She said it was the rule to wait by the fence, but there were kids spilling out by the street. I headed over to the end, squeezed in between Stephen and the giant mound of snow. Stephen was dressed for success. A bright blue snow coat and matching vest and light blue button-down underneath it. No one had told his parents dressing like that came later in life. Maybe they knew Stephen's life would be a short one. He never looked up from his 6-inch tall Superman, the strongest man on the planet. I had both hands in my jacket pockets, holding each other, and my belly, because the lining was ripped and Mom didn't sew. I kicked away a circle of snow. My boots were too thin, and I was going to be there a while. Stephen aimed the Superman at the ground and thought, "Melt this with your heat vision." "What?" I said. "I didn't say nothing," Stephen said. "Sorry," I said. I'd learned to apologize when I'd mistakenly thought someone had said their thoughts out loud. People got angry when I didn't. They called me crazy. Every night I prayed for God to make it go away, but it was always there. The noise inside other people's heads. I never listened on purpose. Never reached in and stole people's thoughts like some believed. For me, it's like hearing a person's true voice. The things they really believe. It's like a whisper from 6 feet. A scream at just inches. The more focused the thought, the louder it gets. You know that silent awkwardness when someone is holding their tongue, stewing in anger after someone does something awful because they don't want to cause a scene? Well, for me, it's like being face to face with a wailing psychopath. An endless scream of all the horrible things people really want to do to each other. Back then, I was still getting used to it. Part of me wanted to turn to Stephen and see if his lips were moving. The other part was smart enough to know the things he was thinking weren't things anyone would say. He was pointing Superman at Corey, the kid who thought I smelled like a girl and that Stephen was a fucking chink. I started humming my ABCs, occupying my mind, blocking Stephen out. It wasn't long before Brenda's mom drove up, then Daryl's, then Jenny's. The next time I counted, there were only 5 of us left. Stephen turned to me and held out Superman. Stephen's eyes were so squinted I could barely see the black. He was thinking he should have stood up for me after I'd pissed my pants. "You can borrow him," he said. I didn't know what to say. I almost asked if he could hear my thoughts, because I'd been watching him play with that toy and wanted it for myself. But I learned that was a good way to get laughed at. I just nodded and said thanks. A shiny black Mercedes pulled up to the gate. Miss Parker called Stephen by his real name, Hong, even though he'd asked her not to that morning. That got Corey started. Bigger than most of us and blacker than all, he ran over and started doing his gorilla impression, pounding his chest, stomping snow everywhere. He shouted, "Hong Kong! Hong Kong!" Stephen's face got red, but he didn't say a word about how he was going to jump in the car and have his father plow right into Corey. Then Corey slanted his eyes and unleashed his ching-chang-ching talk. Stephen figured Corey was jealous of the car. He had no idea Corey was jealous of the stone-faced woman staring straight ahead in the back seat. Corey's mom had died of tuberculosis. If I'd been bigger, braver, I would have said something to defend my very first friend. But I knew Corey would turn on me. Ask me where's my diaper. Despite the cold, my feet freezing so bad they might crack. I had a warm feeling in my chest and I didn't want to ruin it. Soon Stephen was out of the gate, climbing in the front of the Mercedes. In the next few minutes, Corey and the rest of the kids were picked up and gone. It was just me and Superman. The bone-aching cold. Miss Parker. Miss Parker told me to stay where I was, that she'd be right back. I had nowhere to go and was used to waiting, so that's what I did. She went into the classroom, came back out a few minutes later. Instead of heading back to the gate, she walked up to me, touched my puffy blue jacket, and put her face real close. Miss Parker had a face that made you pay attention. That's what Dad said to do. Pay attention to it. Miss Parker smoked cigarettes when she was a kid. She'd be a miss forever. Having anyone's face just inches away wasn't easy, but I didn't flinch. I just stood there, waited for her to talk. I've always been shy. I have a hard time looking people in their eyes. But I looked Miss Parker in her murky blue ones because she'd been nice to me, gave me the corduroys, and told all the kids that if anyone else laughed, they'd be sent to the principal's office. Miss Parker gave me a half smile, spoke out of the right side of her mouth. "Your mom didn't answer, Joey. Is there another number I can call?" I shook my head no. Mom had more important things to do than worry about me. "Is there anyone else who can come get you? Maybe your dad?" No one called Dad when he was at work. I wouldn't be first. I told Miss Parker no, held Superman tight, and tried to stomp the cold right out of my boots. "This poor kid," Miss Parker thought. "I'm going to have to deal with this for the rest of the year." Miss Parker didn't know what to do. She'd never been stuck with a kid this long, and never in the cold. The cold made her bones hurt, but she pretended it didn't. I showed her Superman and pointed at his ass. "He's made of steel." Miss Parker walked me over to the gate. "That's nice." I'd given up on Mom, but had an idea. It wasn't cold when I was moving, and it was just 4 blocks to my house. A blue car passed by the gate, went through the intersection, and pulled to the curb halfway up the block. Miss Parker had her back to it, so I pointed at the car and said, "There she is." Miss Parker had no reason to doubt me, and she was already thinking about the space heater beneath her desk. "Tell your mom she needs to pick you up right here from now on, and tell her we can't wait so long." I looked both ways and ran across the street. When I got to the other side, I slowed down. I didn't want to get to the car too quick. It wasn't a Buick. A fat man with humongous black boots pushed himself out of the car like it was a clown trick. Miss Parker didn't see because she was already heading inside. The man walked in front of me and stopped all of a sudden. He pointed at the house we were in front of and said, "You the one fucking with my flowers?" There weren't any flowers where he was pointing, just mounds of snow. I was smart enough not to argue, and said, "No, sir." The fat man thought I was a little fucking liar and walked into his house. Turning around and running back into the classroom seemed like the smart thing to do, but it was just 4 blocks and I knew my address. I kept walking, one boot after another, even though my toes felt ready to snap off. And then it started snowing sideways. I put my mittens out in front of my face, scrunched my eyes like Stevens. I crossed the street and kept on going, made it all the way to the next corner, where I was supposed to turn right. Or was it left? I turned each way and tried to see the school, but everything was just the same, just walls of white. All I could do was guess, so I went to the right. But that was really a left because I turned around in a half circle. The block was longer than I remembered. I wasn't scared yet, but I was getting close. I'd gone 2 or 3 more blocks when the snow finally stopped. The clouds parted, the sun shining, and that made me feel better. Like maybe there was a God. Like he was actually looking out for me. Still, I couldn't tell where I was. I kept walking and walking, but never crying until this nice lady came up to me and knelt on the sidewalk. I couldn't see her face because my eyes weren't really working. Everything was all blurry and bright. I didn't have to see her eyes to know they were nice. The lady put both her hands on my shoulders. "Honey," she said, "are you lost?" I didn't trust myself to speak. She knew I was lost without me saying a word. Gave me the biggest hug, wrapping her arms so tight around me, tighter than I'd ever been held. "It's going to be all right," she said. "Don't you cry." I hadn't even known I was, but the tears were there, coming down hard. And the lady didn't stop hugging me. She didn't think what a whiny baby like all the other kids. She just hugged me harder and held me until I was all done. "Do you know where you live?" I nodded, sniffed up the snot pouring out of my nose. Her shiny green car was right there, so she told me, "Go ahead and get in." I went to the back door, but she opened the front, the place I never sat with Mom. The nice lady started the car and spoke real soft and called me honey 10 times, trying to figure out where I lived. But even though it took me that long, she never got mad. She said how smart I was to remember the address. When we got to my house, the lady looked out the passenger window. "Is this where you live?" I wanted to say no. I wanted her to drive forever. But I didn't want to lie, so I said yes. "Good," she said. "Let's get you inside. I'm sure your mother's worried." I got out of the car, and the nice lady got out too. She put her hand around my shoulder and started down the path to the front porch. "I'll make sure she's home." Mom's big old Buick that she was dying to trade in for something sexy was in the driveway. I didn't recognize the van parked behind it. Even at 5 years old, I knew what I was walking toward. That it wasn't something good. The nice lady walked us up the 3 steps, her hand on me the whole way. Even when she knocked on the door, no one came, so she knocked again. "Does your mom work?" I said no and pointed to the doorbell. The nice lady pushed it and we heard a noise inside. Fast footsteps. The door opened halfway, and there she was. Mom, in that dark green towel that matched her eyes. She kept one arm pinched to her side to hold it up. Her hair was fire on that snow-white skin.
Sorry, I was in the shower. I found him walking up and down our cul-de-sac on Cherry.
The nice lady kept her hand on my shoulder, stopped me from running away.
That's over 3 miles from here. You've got to excuse him.
Like I couldn't hear, Mom said.
He's a little special sometimes. What the hell were you thinking, Joey?
The nice lady pointed at my eyes, the skin all around them.
He was out there a long time, she said. It'd be a good idea to put something on him right away, and maybe get him to a doctor.
Mom grabbed my hand and pulled me past her, my face brushing against her towel that reeked of an overripe sweetness, something sour underneath. The nice lady said,
Not butter, though. That'll make it worse.
Mom smiled.
I know what's best for my son.
Bitch. The nice lady started to say something. Mom slammed the door and walked me toward the kitchen. Her bedroom door was open, and she was praying I wouldn't look that way, at the guy standing next to the dresser, buckling his pants, his chest all sweaty like he'd been doing push-ups. Mom saw me looking and said,
TV went out again. That's why I couldn't leave. He's fixing it.
She opened the fridge, took out the tub of butter. The yellow tub was shaking, something Mom never did. I wanted to back up, to get away from her. She held me there and said,
Damn it, Joey, stay still.
Mom was really worried and ashamed. She couldn't care less about how she'd forgotten to pick me up. She was feeling bad about what she'd done in her room. Mom stuck one hand into the tub, the same stuff that had been good enough for her growing up. With a huge scoop of butter globbed in one hand, Mom said,
I need you to promise me something. Can you keep a secret?
That was the one thing I was good at. Knowing people's secrets. Acting like I didn't. Mom slapped the cold butter on my tingling cheeks.
Not a word,
she said. Spread the butter across my face. Wasn't all that careful around my eyes.
Not about any of this. You can do that, can't you?
I knew exactly what Mom was talking about. I said,
I won't tell. Not like your father doesn't already know.
I hurried to my room and cried. Mom didn't know at the time I could listen to her thoughts. But she knew she couldn't trust me. After that, whenever she had a man over, she told me to go outside. When the weather was bad, she locked me in my bedroom. I'd sit there and watch the rain leaking in through the tiny window. I guess that's why I didn't freak out like the others when I first got to Brightside. I was used to captivity. The others weren't. The first few nights I'd heard the screams, the uncontrollable sobbing. Sometimes the bootsteps would follow, and the thuds, and then the silence. Other times they would just let the people cry themselves to sleep. The apartment walls were too thick to hear anyone's thoughts. But we still knew what each other was thinking. You didn't have to be a telepath to know everyone was scared shitless. We'd never leave Brightside.
Hey, what's up, guys? We are back. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Chapter 2 of Brightside. Last week on YouTube, I showed myself taking notes, just sitting here for lots of it. And I realized that's not necessary. So this week I turned off the camera, jumped in the sauna, I was taking my notes there. if you're upset about that and you'd like to just watch me sit here and take notes, then you might have some issues, and maybe we need to talk about boundaries. But I don't think you guys mind too much. And it was good. I got a little sweat on, felt a little looser. All right, ready to go. A couple things while thinking about listening to it. It reminded me about my Hulk jacket. I did have a puffy blue jacket. I used to love putting sweatshirts over it and then flexing in front of the mirror and growling everywhere. I was a big fan of Hulk. Pretty much all superheroes, but I think Hulk and Thor are probably my favorites. The big, strong ones always kick ass. But another thing I was thinking about, something at the start, they were talking about the suicides in Brightside. When I first started writing this, I had no idea that suicide was a theme. I didn't know it was important to the story. I didn't know how important it was for me. I think I was denying a lot of it, but I had suicidal thoughts pretty much the majority of my life. I mean, I don't know how young, let's say maybe 10, maybe younger. Definitely had a lot of suicidal ideation, whatever, a lot of suicidal tendencies. Often thought about it. That actually came up this week when I was driving my daughter to school. One of the songs she really likes that we listen to often comes up on the radio is Ghost by Bad Flower. And she's always singing it, and I asked her, like, do you know what the song's about? And I guess she hadn't really thought about it, but she, a couple days before, her mom had talked to her about the song with her. And she hadn't really been listening to the words. But it's about killing yourself, slitting your wrist. And it's a good song, and I told her, and we had a good talk about it, because I told her, like, I was actually getting teary-eyed whenever I hear that in the car with her, because I'm thinking about, damn, if I ever did it all those times where I had a razor blade, where I was thinking about doing it, where I wanted to fucking blow my head off, crash my motorcycle, whatever it was, however I wanted to do it. If any of those times I'd actually been stupid enough to do it, I was like, she wouldn't be there. I wouldn't have ever experienced her, my son, my wife, my life, any of these books. And, luckily that's a thing of the past. Worked through a lot of shit to get over that, and to try to understand why that even ever came about. But again, if that's ever something that goes through your head, for sure talk to someone about that. Seek out therapy, find a friend that you can trust, and just don't fucking do it. Lost a really good friend to that. And that actually was one of the reasons why I wrote this book. Didn't know it until it was over, but that definitely was a huge factor. What else? More fun stuff. I don't know. I think that was pretty much it. I did take a couple notes that are going to help me with Beyond Brightside and the Try Not to Die. I don't really need to talk about them on here because they're really not that interesting to you. I often have to look up the old story just to see whether or not certain rooms had a door or a knob, well, they all had fucking doors. Whether the doors had a knob on them or a handle, and just lots of stuff like that, just for consistency. I do want it to be, right on. Although I'll probably leave a couple errors that way you guys could find and be like, oh, you fucked up here or you fucked up there. Like, yeah, I'm human. All right, guys, I'm all hot and sweaty from this sauna session. Need to go grab some water, go relax, edit this, and finish up Try Not to Die and Brightside. I think as soon as I'm done with this one, before I jump back into Beyond Brightside, I might even write a short story, short horror story. Those are always fun. Haven't given myself that opportunity in a while, and I have a bunch that are just sitting there waiting to be finished. So maybe maybe I will do that. You won't be doing it. You'll hear about it next week if I do it. But until then, I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I will talk to you later. And remember, if you guys do enjoy this, be sure to share it with your friends, leave a review, ask a question. I'll answer it on here. I appreciate you guys listening, and all right, later.